Welcome back. The project today is going to be pulling the transmission because I want to inspect my clutch, but the bigger issue I have is the oil pan in the front was hitting my rack, and this is a stock oil pan on a Gen 1 Coyote, and I have my rack lowered to the lowest point I can on solid bushings. So I had a little bit of clearance when I put it in, but it's now basically sitting on the rack. So that's going to be coming out and that's going to get changed. So bear with me. It's a brutal process. I'm doing this all from underneath, but I'm sure that I'll get it all accomplished. So stay tuned for this. One of the things I like to do is make sure I get my exhaust repositioned back. So I've got this clamp marked on the right side, and I put a little T mark here so I know where this is going to go in and out. Did the same thing on this side. And now I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and drop this down. After hours of struggling, both long tube headers are out. I will be putting new motor mounts on. I see that I got a little bit too much heat there. And I'm going to be inspecting the clutch, but you cannot get that 3650 out with the long tubes on. There's just no way. And the headers are a real bugger from the bottom. So I have a plan going back in. All right, here's the clutch. It's my dual friction center force. And it actually looks still in good shape, but now that I have it out for the second time, I am going to replace it. I'm going to do some repair on the exhaust. I'm going to plug a couple little air holes, bleed holes where these were on the top side when the exhaust guy did it. So I'll fix these here and this one. Okay, I'm here with my buddy Mike, Mr. Bender. He's gonna attack my tiny little holes here. So we'll see what happens. Watch your eyes, everybody.
What about that right there?
I don't think that was a hole because I don't see any stain coming out. But if you want to just attack it, you can.
Here.
I didn't brush that one or anything.
Let's just see. This one might pop.
Well, what about snap and crackle?
Snap, crackle, they usually are along for the ride.
Okay. Well, you know, I'm thinking Rice Krispies. So.
I know.
Just a quick update on the transmission, clutch, motor mount issue that I've got. Everything's out, and when I'm going a little bit further, I did find some damage. As I did more inspection, I found that even though I had my rack lowered as much as I could with solid mounts, the rack actually was hitting the pan right here, even though I had clearance when I first put this in. So now I will be replacing the stock pan with the Holley oil pan. It's actually about an inch shorter. I'm going to say an inch, at least an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch. That'll give me plenty of clearance. Plus it goes back about another inch before it actually drops off here. So I should have ample room and not have an issue there. So what I'm doing now is getting ready to drop the K-member so I can replace the motor mounts because I can't get the stud out. Well, actually you can see just barely up through here. There's a stud right there. There's no way I can raise the engine enough. Secured the engine without taking the hood or using my chain hoist with my bar. Hooked up a couple of different chains. So that's up in the air. Got all but these last two K-member mounts out, bolts rather, out right here, which I'll take out. The K-member is down away from the chassis, as you can kind of see right now, nothing's holding the engine except my bar across the top. So next step is going to be motor mounts first, because I'll pull this out of the way and get the K-member out of the way. The engine's being supported, put motor mounts in, and then remove the pan. I removed my longer studs, which were, I had one here for bracket, one on each corner. I removed the two 10mm ones in the front. I'm going to start in the back here, remove these. So this pickup tube has to come off. This gasket comes down. You got to get these two bolts that are on the pump, which I'm going to work at for a little bit. They're a lot easier now because I'm underneath, where before I had the pan and everything on when I did it on the bench. Holley wants you to bolt the pan up, put some modeling clay here in the bottom of the pan, or you could actually put it on the screen right here. I wouldn't put it in the screen, but I'd put it out here on the surface and cinch the pan up 4 bolts, just snug, and then remove it and then measure the clay. Well, there's other ways to do that, and I've gone ahead and did a little bit of a head start. So I know what the pan depth is on the inside, and I know that this is, if I keep this on the level, keep the measurements the same, I'm looking at 5 3/4 on that side and 5 5/8 here. So I could cheat a little bit, 5 3/4, 5 5/8, or 5 3/4 here. Let me get another. So there's 5. It's about 5 and 13, 5 3/4. So if I subtract this distance from the depth of the pan, which is 5 15/16 basically, I'm going to have enough clearance. And to do this test, this is just dry. This is 1 bolt here. I took the O-ring off and just snugged the tube to the oil pump, just so that I don't have to ruin the oil or the oil ring or anything like that. So there's 1 bolt holding in, and this was just to do a test fit to make sure that my dimensions are okay, which they are. So I'm not going to be starving. They did a really good job, I guess, calculating all this out. So now I will be taking this back down, sealing up the corners with the silicone, putting the O-ring back on, and then waiting about 5 minutes, assembling this, putting the pan back on. I'm going to leave the K-member off for right now, slide my jack bridge under here, put a block under the pan, and I'm going to leave it sit, and I'm not doing anything until that cures. I don't like to mess with stuff with silicone. I like to make sure that it's sealed good, and I run the risk after. Okay, and just before I forget and I don't leave this out, this is the oil pan. So the depth here with a straight edge is, 5 15/16, 5 15/16, and they say they like 1/4 to 3/8 clearance, which I'm going to have. I'm going to fall right in the 1/4 inch, 15/16 range. So putting a straight edge across here and measuring in a couple spots where the pickup tube is going to be, I come with the same measurements. So that's how that's going to be. And again, I will put some Loctite on these bolts that go in here for this baffle. That has to get put back down in there. Then I'll put the gasket, do all that stuff, and then bolt this back up. Holley gives you some instructions on how to make a socket to get in that front one after you remove it. So I took a 10mm and kind of hollowed out part of it just to get around so that I could tighten that front bolt. It was easy getting out with my universal with the old one and then getting it started, but you just can't get it tight. So you make a special socket. It's 10mm, just a regular old Craftsman 1/4 inch drive, and shape it to what you need. Works fine. So, given that, The pickup and stuff is in there. I have a bolt here holding the pan gasket and one over here. So this is just held up while I was tightening everything. So now I'm ready to grab the pan and put that up. I'm gonna pull out the 2 bolts that I have right now, here and here. And I'm gonna grab the new pan, the Holley pan, and put it up there. Hopefully everything works. Should. That was one of the things I liked about this pan. It kept all the stock stuff. So that'll be there. That gets plugged in, and then I'll probably put a clamp. Yeah, I got enough. I could probably put one right there just to keep that tucked in a little bit. So this is gonna sit now. I'm gonna walk away from it and come back another day. And one thing I will say, these edges are sharp. The aluminum is sharp, so be very, very careful. If you're not using gloves in your hands, keeping things clean I know is important, but keeping your fingers from being sliced up is more important. Got everything back together. I'm gonna just do a simple recap. The rack has been bolted back up where it was. I may take it in and my alignment check just to make sure, but as you can see, I've got plenty of space behind, and I can actually grab the entire rack. There's that much clearance on the pan back here. This is the clearance here, so there's no rubbing anymore. I was getting rubbing on the pan and the rack right in this area right along here. I'll show you my old pan where that was. And there's plenty of clearance in here. Exhaust is in. Everything's buttoned up back to here. After the pan is in, I put a block underneath the front of the pan, use my transmission jack to lift the weight off of that, take the K-member down, then take the motor mounts out, take the starter out, slide it out back through here, because you can't get, I can't get it out, and I got a mini starter even through here. But take the starter out, and then with all this, the K-member and stuff out, then I can get to all the bolts on the headers and the gaskets, and then drop the headers. And everything is just reverse order, putting it back. More like a puzzle, but it got done. Having the pan on ahead of time made a big help, because to change the pan, originally I had to drop the K-member, so I had to support the engine from the top, which I did. But now that the pan's in, and that's not going to be coming back out, it'll be easier to drop the K-member. My stern shaft is in up on top, and I've got my rack where it's supposed to be. So now it's back to the top and tighten the one inside. All right, one of the things you have to do is you have to pull the shaft. You have to stab it up here first. Then you can stick it on the steering rack, and then you pull it up so you can get your bolt in and lock this down. And I don't want to step on or push on my brake pedal because I have the front calipers off. So you got to be mindful of that. Okay, that'll take care of that part. Now I'm going to start putting the suspension back together. Got my bolts all laid out here. So it's just a repeat process. The starred one is in the front. repeat to the other side, and then I'll get it up in the air, get it down, put the sway bar after I get the tires on. So I'm basically going to go to the other side and we'll finish her up. I don't think I need to record that. Welcome back. Hopefully this is my last day. I'm going to be putting the X-pipe back up. Drive line's tight. I filled the transmission, so I've got the top sealing right now. Gonna stick the pipe back in, exhaust, engine oil. I'm doing a little bit of a modification on some power steering lines up front, and then I'm gonna fire it up. So I'm gonna get busy on this, and again, I'll use my reference marks that I had so I know where everything lines up. Okay, well that should take care of everything that's underneath here. I'm getting ready to do a test fire, basically a restart. I did some power steering work. I formed a new return hose, big hose, so that I didn't have a little bit of a kink in it. So everything's back together, engine's full of oil. So I am going to check the startup. Well, I have a fuel leak, and I don't know if the fitting's loose. Oh yeah, okay. I have a fitting that's loose. Okay, during the process of pulling the transmission and moving things around, having my bar across here, I probably loosened by accident the return line on the regulator in the back, so it was like seeping a little bit. I found the grips underneath, because I was looking underneath the car for oil leaks. Saw that, came up, found out what it was, tightened it, everything's good. Power steering fluid's level now. I got a few things to put together in the interior, but I'm happy that I don't hear any exhaust leaks, because it was a son of a beehive. Oil pan looks good underneath. When I get it back up in the air, I'll do another video of that. But for the most part, I'm good about it. And thanks for hanging in there with me, because it was a PITA. Just finalizing the project of installing the Holley oil pan, and then of course getting my headers back on and the transmission, putting a new clutch in, even though I didn't need it, but I have peace of mind now. I know it's done. But as you can see up here, the reason you can't get the transmission out is there's just not enough to bring it back to clear the headers on this side. So getting the headers off is a must, at least in my case, unless somebody has a trick out there for getting the transmission out with the headers on. The headers have to come off. So it'll be basically block this up here, pull the K-member, block the engine, steering shaft off, and then K-member down, motor mounts, starter, headers, transmission, in that order. So again, the Holley oil pan, nice piece, fits very nice, a lot of clearance. Still an 8-quart, so that's good. Gets to use its own, the same sensors as a stock. And coming around the front, Luckily, after going to the alignment shop and getting everything checked out, I was actually pretty close. I was surprised on getting everything set back by marking my K-member, but we were able to take the rack and go from it being at its lowest position to now its highest position, which gave me a better reaction on my bump steer and steering. The rack is basically at its highest point on solid mounts, and I can still get my hand all the way around the rack. I have plenty of room here. Hindsight, for someone saying that you don't need a special pan, you can use the stock oil pan, yeah, you can maybe get by. But this way, you got plenty of clearance here, plenty of room. And this is as high as it'll go, and also the steering feels a lot nicer. I just got the car back from the alignment shop, and we were able to raise the rack back to its highest level instead of it being at its lowest level because of the pan, the stock oil pan. Had I known a lot of things beforehand, I would have changed that pan right off the bat, along with everything else that I did prior to putting it in. I'm not a fan of using spacers under motor mounts and spacing the engine up, so I don't like doing that. The Holley pan, it's what they call their Holley Coyote swap oil pan, is almost like, to me, a must. You still have the 8 quarts, but you have plenty of clearance, and I still have over 1 inch of clearance between the top of the rack and the bottom of the oil pan. So overall, I'm very happy with it. It's just a big puzzle to remove the transmission and the headers in reverse order. You remove the headers, then the transmission, because there's just not enough clearance, as you can see prior or in the earlier part of the video where you cannot get the transmission out. So at least in my case, my benefit is I have a rack. I'll still do it from underneath, because either way I still have to take the K-member out, whether I'm going to drop the engine as a unit or just drop the transmission. So a little bit of work, but I have a benefit. So anyway, thanks for hanging in there with me, and I'll see you on the next video.